I found the contract on a Tuesday night in late March, tucked behind our car insurance policy in a manila folder my husband had mislabeled medical. MISC. I was 32 weeks pregnant, exhausted, and looking for our health insurance card to photocopy for the hospital pre-registration form. What I pulled out instead was a 12-page document that put a dollar amount on my unborn daughter's life. My name is Petra. I'm 32 years old and I work as a forensic nurse investigator for the compliance department at a large hospital system in Houston, Texas. My entire career is built around reading documents that are designed to hide the truth. Patient records, billing codes, discharge summaries, treatment authorizations. I have spent 8 years learning exactly how medical fraud gets buried under legitimate-looking paperwork. I thought that skill was something I left at the office every evening when I came home to the life I had carefully built with my husband. I was wrong. Before I go any further, drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from, and if you've ever had to use your own skills to protect yourself from someone who was supposed to love you, hit like and subscribe. You are going to want to hear how this ends. I met my husband, I'll call him Warren, at a charity gala 6 years ago. He was charming in that specific way that men who run their own companies tend to be. Confident without seeming arrogant, generous with his attention, quick to make you feel like the most interesting person in the room. He owned a small commercial real estate development firm called Westfield Commercial Partners. He had a decent portfolio, a beautiful townhouse in Midtown, and a family that appeared on the surface to be warm and close-knit. His mother, I'll call her Francine, was a retired school administrator who hosted Sunday dinners and called me sweetheart from the very first time we met. His sister, I'll call her Tabitha, was a pharmaceutical sales rep who laughed loudly and had been married for 5 years to a man named Gideon, whose family came from old oil money up in Dallas. I thought I had married into something solid, something real. When I got pregnant last November, Warren cried, actual tears, standing in our bathroom holding the test. It was one of the most genuinely moving moments of our marriage. I believed every bit of it. Now, standing in his home office with that 12-page document in my hands, I understood those tears differently. The document was titled Private Reproductive Transfer and Compensation Agreement, dated February 7th, 5 weeks before I found it. The parties listed were a family trust registered in Gideon's name on one side and a Delaware LLC called Westfield Medical Holdings on the other. A quick search on my phone told me Westfield Medical Holdings had been registered in Delaware 6 weeks prior, with Warren listed as the sole managing member. The agreement stated in dense legal language that the birth mother, identified only as a current patient of affiliated provider Dr. E. Voss, M.D., would deliver an infant at a private medical facility, after which the infant would be transferred to the care of the receiving family for a fee of $280,000, payable in 2 installments. A physician's signature line at the bottom had already been initialed. The name printed beneath it was Dr. Edmund Voss. My hands were not shaking. That is what I remember most clearly. I expected them to shake. Instead, a cold, spreading stillness moved through my body, the same stillness I feel when I pull a patient's billing file and immediately see the codes that don't add up. It's not shock, it's recognition. I placed the document exactly as I found it. I put the folder back behind the car insurance policy. I walked out of his office, closed the door quietly, and went to our bedroom. Then I picked up my phone and called my best friend. Her name is Monique. She has been a labor and delivery nurse for 11 years and my closest friend for 7. She answered on the second ring even though it was past 10 o'clock, because that is the kind of friend she is. I need you to not react, I said. I need you to just listen. She listened. By the time I finished, her voice had gone very quiet in the way it does when she is absolutely serious. First thing tomorrow morning, she said, I'm pulling everything I can find on this Dr. Voss. I already had suspicions. Dr. Edmund Voss operated a private obstetrics clinic in a suburb southwest of Houston. He had staff privileges at 2 small private hospitals, no affiliations with any major medical system, and a website that marketed heavily to high-net-worth clients seeking what he called personalized boutique birth experiences. In my line of work, that phrase alone is a red flag. Monique called me back before I had finished my coffee the next morning. She had searched the Texas Medical Board's public complaint database, 2 complaints in the last 4 years, both filed by uninsured women, both involving infants declared stillborn at Dr. Voss's private facility. Both cases settled out of court under non-disclosure agreements, with the board's investigation quietly closed for insufficient evidence. He had done this before. He had a system. I was next in line. I spent the rest of that week building the case from the inside out. I reached out quietly to an FBI special agent I had worked with 2 years earlier on a Medicare fraud investigation. I told him I had a situation developing. He told me that what I was describing was federal wire fraud because the LLC was incorporated in Delaware and the funds were crossing state lines, and potentially conspiracy involving trafficking for financial gain. He told me to keep gathering and not to tip my hand. I did not tip my hand. Meanwhile, I learned the full shape of the motive. Warren had taken on a major mixed-use development project in the Heights neighborhood 2 years ago. The financing fell through. The project collapsed. He had personally guaranteed portions of the debt to private investors, which meant his personal assets were exposed, including our home, which I did not know until I was sitting at his desk at midnight with his business files spread open in front of me. He owed somewhere north of $2.5 million that he did not have. His firm was insolvent. He had been hiding it from me for 18 months. Tabitha and Gideon were his lifeline. Gideon's grandfather had died the previous spring and left his estate in a trust with one ironclad condition. Gideon must produce a biological heir by December 31st of that calendar year, or the principal, $3 million, reverts to a charitable foundation and Gideon is cut out entirely. Tabitha had been unable to conceive despite years of fertility treatment. Time was running out. So my husband had offered them my daughter. He had negotiated a price, set up a shell company, and arranged for a corrupt physician to falsify the birth record and hand my child over through a back channel while I was sedated in a private clinic. And then he had cried happy tears in our bathroom when I showed him the positive pregnancy test. The dinner came 3 weeks after I found the contract. Tabitha called to invite us to her house in Bel Air, a quiet neighborhood of large homes with long driveways and well-kept lawns. "We have some exciting news," she said, her voice bright and breathless in a way that turned my stomach. When we arrived, Gideon opened the door holding a glass of bourbon. He was a tall man with the particular ease of someone who has never waited for anything. He shook Warren's hand and gave me a look that settled on my stomach for a half-second before moving back up to my face. The news was that Tabitha was pregnant. 9 weeks along, she announced, pressing her hands to her still flat abdomen with precision. The table erupted. Francine, who had also been invited, I noted, wept decorously. Warren hugged his sister. Gideon received congratulations with the self-satisfaction of a man who had closed a deal. I hugged Tabitha too. I told her I was so happy for her. I watched her face very carefully while I said it. She was not 9 weeks pregnant. She was not pregnant at all. She was rehearsing the performance she would need to sustain for the next 8 weeks, until she walked out of Dr. Voss's clinic carrying my daughter. Later in the evening, I excused myself to use the restroom. In the hallway, I paused outside the closed door of their spare bedroom. I pushed it open. The room had been repainted, soft green, the color of new leaves. A white crib sat against the far wall, half assembled. On the dresser, a small stack of clothing still folded in boutique tissue paper, all of it in pink. They knew my daughter was a girl. Warren had been at every ultrasound. I stood in that half-assembled nursery for as long as I could afford to. Then I walked back to the dining room and finished my dinner. 3 days after the dinner, Francine arrived at our house with 2 large suitcases and a casserole dish. "With the baby coming so soon," she announced, "I'm not going to let you carry this alone." She said it to me but looked at Warren, and the look between them was quick and practiced. She set up in the guest room. She began cooking my meals. On her 3rd morning, she handed me a small glass jar of loose herbal tea. "My grandmother's blend," she said warmly. "Raspberry leaf and a few other things. I drank it every day in my 3rd trimester. Very gentle." She set it on the counter and watched me with a soft, expectant smile. I thanked her, poured a cup, and let it sit while I looked at my phone. When she left the kitchen, I poured it down the drain. I brought the jar to Monique, who consulted a pharmacist friend of ours. The blend did contain raspberry leaf. It also contained blue cohosh and pennyroyal, 2 compounds documented to stimulate uterine contractions and cause preterm labor. Neither one belongs anywhere near a 3rd trimester pregnancy. These are not folk remedies, they are abortifacients, and they are dangerous. My mother-in-law was trying to force early labor so they could control the delivery timeline. I kept accepting the tea every morning. I kept pouring it down the drain. I found the rest of her supply hidden in the linen closet and replaced the contents with plain chamomile. I kept 1 sealed sample for the federal agent. What I needed next was Gideon's voice. I needed him to say out loud what he was purchasing. The baby shower was held at a rented event space in Sugarland. I wore a wireless audio recorder that Monique had sourced through a contact, the size of a button, clipped inside the seam of my dress at the waist. Gideon drank steadily throughout the afternoon. By 4 o'clock his tie was loosened and his shoulders had the rolling ease of a man who has never faced a consequence in his life. He came to stand beside my chair while Warren was across the room. "You look wonderful," he said in the way men say it when they mean something else entirely. His eyes dropped to my stomach. "I feel great," I told him. He leaned slightly closer. He smelled like bourbon and dry cleaning. "Good," he said, his voice dropping. "My grandfather's attorneys are breathing down my neck. December deadline doesn't move." A pause. "We're counting on everything going smoothly." I smiled at him. My voice was perfectly level, of course. He moved back toward the bar, satisfied. I had clean audio, his voice, his words, and a direct reference to the December deadline. Monique, 3 tables away, had already uploaded the encrypted file to the agent's secure server. That night, after Warren was asleep, I assembled the complete evidence package. Every document, every wire transfer record. Monique's pharmacist contact had a friend in financial compliance who helped me trace the first installment of $140,000 from Gideon's trust to Westfield Medical Holdings the week after the contract was signed. The T analysis, the audio, the photograph of Tabitha's nursery taken on my phone that night in Delaware, Dr. Voss's complaint history, annotated with case numbers, a timeline connecting every element to every other. I sent it to the FBI field office, attention my contact. I sent it to the Texas Medical Board's emergency complaint line, flagged as imminent patient harm. I sent it to the law firm that administered Gideon's family trust, with a professional cover letter identifying myself as a healthcare compliance investigator. Then I closed the laptop, lay down, and slept better than I had in months. 2 mornings later, I woke at 5 a.m. to genuine contractions, not the kind I had considered faking, real ones. I was 35 weeks along, early but survivable. The physical weight of the previous weeks had apparently pressed my body toward the finish line ahead of schedule. I timed them for 20 minutes, then reached for my phone, and Warren walked out of the bathroom. He looked at me. He looked at the phone. I watched the calculation happen on his face. "I need to go to the hospital," I said. "I'll call Dr. Voss," he said, moving toward his nightstand. "I want Methodist," I said. "That's where my records are. That's where my OB is." "Dr. Voss is better equipped for." "Warren," I looked directly at him. "Please call 911. He did not call 911. Over the next 8 minutes, everything he said and did confirmed for the federal record what I already knew. He blocked the bedroom door. He took my phone. He told me, in a voice I had never heard from him but somehow always suspected was underneath the charming one, that I was going to Dr. Voss's clinic, that this was already arranged, and that I needed to stop making this difficult. I had a burner phone, purchased 6 weeks earlier, tucked into the lining of my hospital bag in the closet 2 feet away. I had pre-programmed one text to my FBI contact, 6 words, active, moving me by force now. I sent it while Warren had his back to me. The drive took 18 minutes. Francine sat beside me in the back seat the whole way, holding my hand, saying soothing things. She was wearing a cardigan and pearl earrings. She had spent 3 weeks trying to bring on my labor early with contaminated tea. Dr. Voss's clinic was in a converted professional building off a quiet access road, the kind of place designed to be easy to miss. Gideon's black Range Rover was already in the lot. Tabitha stood near the entrance in a long coat, holding a pink receiving blanket. I looked at that blanket. I thought about my daughter. I thought about what it had taken to get to this exact moment. They wheeled me into a procedure room in the back. Dr. Voss was already in scrubs. He had calm hands and small, flat eyes, and he introduced himself with the pleasant authority of a man accustomed to no one questioning him. "We're going to keep you very comfortable," he said, and reached for a syringe. "What is that?" I asked. "Something to help you relax." "I'd like to see the label," I said. He paused for exactly 1 fraction of a second. Behind him, Warren said my name in a tone that was meant to end the conversation. I leaned back against the pillow. I closed my eyes. I had already done everything I needed to do. The door came off its hinges 40 seconds later. Federal agents move fast and they are loud and they fill a room completely. My contact came in behind them with his badge up. He looked at the syringe in Dr. Voss's hand and said, clearly and without hurry, "Set that down and step away from the patient." Dr. Voss set it down. He was in handcuffs 90 seconds after that. In the lobby, I could hear Gideon's voice rising, indignant, demanding to speak to someone's supervisor. He was still holding his phone, probably trying to reach his attorney. He had no way of knowing that the trust's legal team had received my email 17 hours earlier, had convened an emergency board session that morning, and had formally revoked his beneficiary status before noon. $3 million gone before he ever set foot in that building. My daughter was born 4 hours later at Methodist Hospital, a real hospital with legitimate staff, in a room where every person present had exactly one job: to make sure we were both safe. She weighed 5 pounds and 11 ounces. She had a full head of dark hair and a cry that sounded like she was furious at the inconvenience. I named her Rose, after my mother, who was sitting in the waiting room having taken the first flight out of Atlanta the moment I called her. She had not asked whether she should come. She had just come. There are people in your life who you call when everything falls apart, and then there are people who answer before the second ring, no matter what time it is, and my mother is both of those people. I should have called her sooner. That is the one thing I would do differently. The charges were filed 4 months later. Warren pled not guilty on wire fraud, criminal conspiracy, and obstruction, which meant a federal trial, which meant every document I had gathered entered the public record. His attorney argued he hadn't fully understood the terms of the agreement he had personally signed and initialed. The prosecutor played the audio of Gideon's voice from the baby shower. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. Warren received a federal sentence of 9 years. He will serve a minimum of 7.5. Dr. Voss surrendered his medical license before the criminal trial. He now faces 3 separate felony charges, including the 2 prior cases that had been buried under non-disclosure agreements, because those women, once they heard what had happened to me, came forward. Gideon was convicted on federal conspiracy charges and is awaiting sentencing. His father released a public statement through a Dallas law firm formally disavowing him. The $3 million transferred to the charitable foundation exactly as Gideon's grandfather had written. Tabitha entered a plea agreement in exchange for testimony and received 18 months of supervised release. I know some people feel that was too light. What I know is that she will carry what she was willing to do for the rest of her life, and that is a weight I would not trade for anything in mine. Francine was charged with conspiracy and tampering. The sealed tea sample was the central piece of physical evidence. She received 26 months. I took a position at the Texas Attorney General's Healthcare Fraud Division 3 months after Rose was born. I applied on a Thursday. I had an offer the following Monday. Rose is 4 months old now. She smells like warm milk and baby lotion, and she makes a specific face right before she sneezes that I could watch for the rest of my life. She is entirely perfectly herself, and she does not belong to anyone but us. My mother drove back to Atlanta after Rose was born, packed up her apartment, rented the house next door to mine, and moved to Houston. She did not ask, she just did it. I cried for about 40 minutes when I understood what she was doing. Warren thought he had figured out exactly who I was: a wife, a vessel, someone soft enough to deceive and calm enough not to fight back. He forgot, or never bothered to learn, that I had spent 8 years making a career out of finding precisely the kind of lies he was telling. He left the evidence in a folder he knew I would eventually need to open, and when I opened it, I did not panic. I got to work. If someone in your life has ever underestimated what you are capable of, share this video with them. Hit like, subscribe to Bunny Revenge, and leave me a comment below. I want to know where you're watching from, and whether you've ever had to protect yourself using the very skills the people around you forgot to take seriously. Rose is asleep in the next room. I can hear her on the monitor, small, steady breaths, completely safe. That is the only sound in the world that matters.